and even the term coming out, I've always had like issues with. I try to, because for most of my life, I was creating a little queer world for myself, right? And I didn't want to come out of that queer world. I wanted to invite people in. I'm like, child, y'all can come on in. I ain't coming out, child. Y'all can come on in, okay?
My name is Blair Imani. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an author, I'm an educator, I'm an influencer, and I'm a big fan of you, Christopher. Tell us about yourself.
Well, Blair, thank you. I am such a fan, and it's an honor to share space with you today. Hello, everyone. My name is Christopher Griffin. I use they, she, he pronouns interchangeably, and I am a Black non binary queen obsessed with the botanical scene, darling. Also, new author and storyteller. So, Blair, I'm so excited to have a conversation with you today.
Fabulous. Well, I learned as we've been getting to know each other in preparation for this that you have an academic background, much like myself. So I'd love to hear a bit about that too, because I see, like the beautiful plants, I see the monsteras, I see the misting online, but I also know that
Oh.
behind it is like a generous amount of theory and rootedness. I mean, rooted, like pun intended. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that too.
Yeah, so I work in education where I do LGBTQ plus advocacy work. So I do events where I'm creating spaces for my students to see themselves, to explore themselves, to engage in storytelling. We were talking about that earlier, Blair, and I can't wait to get into that and the importance of storytelling. But also program consultation. So if folks are looking to make their programs more inclusive, they can talk with me and I can connect them with folks or just advise them on how they can do that. I also advise student groups and help them become the best leaders that they can be. So yeah, working in student affairs, working in education, there's like a lot of different hats that I get to wear, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with the students that I do.
Fabulous. And so being an influencer, I want to talk about so many different things, but I think like part of this is just me wanting to like get feedback from myself, so I don't feel like I'm just going through it by myself. But I
Hello.
went super viral in 2020, and there were so many of us Black creators who like, once people writ large realized like, I think what okay genuinely happened. I usually joke and say it was a bunch of folks being like, "Oh, racism is bad. Oh, snap." But what it actually was that there was no sports, there were no concerts, there was no travel. People had to sit home and bear witness to the suffering of anti-blackness that anti-blackness
Hmm.
wreaks on our communities, and then try to find in this very like instant gratification world something to fix it. So black squares were posted, clapbacks were
Hmm.
had,
Hmm.
and melanated voices were listened to. And that's interesting because everybody has melanin, but it
Hello.
was just it was such an interesting period for me. I woke up, um I had grown like a following of like 50,000 people over 5 years. Then the next day I woke up and I had 100,000 people. And the way that I rubbed my eyes so hard was like probably not safe, but I was just so in disbelief because it's like we always had stories to tell, but now we were being listened to. What was your experience like during that period?
It was pretty much the same experience. So definitely had a heightened growth in 2020. And I started, being a plant parent and like being in nature started when I was really young with my grandmother. So always been into nature, always loved plants, but began to document my journey the summer of 2016. And so I had been doing this for 4 years, like enjoying myself. And I think I was around like 50K as well at the beginning of 2020. And then there was just this accumulation of folks that were, beginning to follow my journey. And I thought it was, and I understood why, obviously, just being socially aware of everything that was happening in the world at that time. So very aware of what was happening. Um, but honestly, it was a little scary. I was like, how are people finding me? And what are they looking for, right? Like, how do they perceive me and what I'm doing? Um, And so it was really interesting. And, I engaged folks in conversation around, like, why they had begun to follow me. Cause I really genuinely wanted to know. I was like, hey, just new follow. Like, what's up? Like, and I think some folks were shocked that I was like reaching out, but I was like, I'm curious, like, how did you find me? And I think there were a lot of, I can't remember the hashtag, but it was basically like follow Black creators, like keep out suggestions, people sharing profiles and stuff like that. I was also doing that. Um, but yeah, that's similar to your story. It kind of just happened over the course of a few days, and then continued into a few months, and then yeah, here we are.
And I think that's so true. Like when you respond to folks, they're like, "Oh, snap, this is a person." And I think that's really what it comes down to is like sometimes when we
Hmm.
consume people's content, like we're not thinking about this as something that somebody's behind or creating or they're a whole person with their whole story. They're just like, I
Yep.
mean, I just even admitted to it myself. I was like, I see the plants, I know the theories behind it, but I don't know your whole story. And I think that being
Yeah.
honest about that is necessary. And I found that there was this interesting moment where when my queerness became a matter of discussion within this context of like, okay, I followed you because of your blackness, you wearing a hijab, so I assume you're Muslim. Queerness though, and that was an interesting thing. Like it's the intersectionality of who I am, and how I relate to different systems of power. And
Hmm.
so we were talking about earlier too, like this idea of inviting people into your space, but I really felt like I had to just say everything that I was in order to like I don't know, like even probably for yourself, like when you discuss your pronouns, like using they, she, and he pronouns, folks might be like, explain. And there's this like sense of
Yeah.
entitlement over our information. Do you find that as well?
Ooh, yes, 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 yes. I'll get random comments and messages where it's not even a hi, and it's kind of just like go straight into like what they're looking for, um, which is it's social media is just such an interesting thing. Social media is just such an interesting thing, and I do think that sometimes it erases some of those social cues that we're used to. Right, we kind of just skip over a lot of stuff and just like go straight to the point. Um, so yeah, I have experienced that. I think for me, it was really around my gender expression as a non-binary person. I think that's what folks had questions about, like, "Oh, why are you wearing heels?" I'm like, "None of your business." Like, why do you feel the need to ask me something like that and on a
In that
public
way. And there's
platform?
this like such a weird thing where it's like, well, you're rude for not telling me. And it's like, I'm sorry. I don't know who you are. I don't know where you came from. I don't know your motivation. You're demanding information from me and I'm rude for not giving it to you. What is this world that we're in? You
Yeah,
know?
it's so interesting. So I think that's why it's important for, folks to I think creating boundaries when it comes to social media is so important and necessary and healthy. And so whenever I'm talking to folks who are interested in diving into this world and navigating this world, because it does take a lot of intentional navigation and boundary setting, is that you don't have to share everything about yourself. There are things that I just keep for myself. I'm not always looking for opportunities like, oh, what can I share? What can I share? It's like, all right, I know what I want to share. I know the things that are personal, and just for me, just for close friends and family. And so I have, real boundary settings around, what I choose to share and what parts of myself that I want to share with folks. Because, I mean, we don't owe anything to anybody, especially as, Black folk, queer folks navigating this society in a world of systems that weren't created for us in the first place. We don't owe anybody anything. So,
Absolutely. No, I think let's dig into that deeper. Like these systems, like heterosexism, heteronormativity, the entitlement to Black folks' labor, particularly feminine presenting Black folks. Like there's so many aspects of this that are like the whole gig. Like it's all
mhm.
entrenched in the makeup of these systems. Then it's built into these algorithms because those things are not without their biases because the people who built
Hello,
them are not without their biases.
hello.
And so some of the boundaries that was the first thing I think I did to like get my whole like kind of my hands around it. And it's so
Mm,
funny. My mother Mama Imani, who is the queen of setting boundaries, saw me setting boundaries online and was like, Blair, you're being a little harsh. And I'm like, you do this every day in real life with people with less polite words, you know? You can't, you like, I would never pretend to tell my mom anything. But it was just so interesting. One of the first things I did, I was like, hey, I don't give relationship advice. I do not talk about things that happen outside of the United States.
Mm,
I, stick to my lane is big, but I stay in it.
mhm,
And
mhm,
it was like, then I started seeing people who are like, wow, you're so brave for like saying that. And it makes me sad because it should be the default. Like, we should be prizing people on the ways that they teach us to interact with them. Because in a society where we are taught to dehumanize people, the folks who are dehumanized often have to do the work of teaching people how to interact with them. So yeah, I
mhm.
don't do relationship advice. If somebody's having a mental health crisis, I will direct them to crisis text line, which is 741-741. They're based in New York as well. I
Hello.
try to just make sure that folks know, like, even when somebody reaches out to me and they're just being 100% foul and I have the time of day for it, and they're like, hey, like, they're just spitting vitriol. Sometimes I'll just be back like, did you mean to hurt my feelings? And sometimes, actually, 9 times out of 10, folks will be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm just going through it. I just put it on you. And then we get to have a little
Mm,
heart to heart about projection and misplaced anger. But it
mm.
has been crucial because otherwise you just get run over. So what are some of the boundaries you've set for yourself?
Yeah, I really try because I think it's important that because there's a lot of Black trauma in the world, right? There's a lot of Black trauma. You look at, and not to go too deeply into it, but I think there are, moments when that is the focus, like Black trauma is the focus, right? Because so much of it is happening in the world, and we are experiencing that every single day. But the magical thing about Black folk is that we also are the authors of our own joy, right? And we are experiencing joy. We are creating those moments for ourselves. We are creating those moments for each other. We're empowering each other to rest, to be happy, to do the things that, help us to feel free. And so, my one of my boundaries is that I want my account, my, social media presence to be rooted in joy and happiness, right? And so in moments that I'm not feeling that, I do not post. I do not engage. Like that is, and so I think for me, I think it's important for us to have spaces where we can be happy, be joyful, be creative, romanticize experiences. And not everything happens on social media, right? Like, I'm having these conversations with my students. I'm having these conversations with my family members, with my peers, right? The much needed conversations that need to happen in the world. It doesn't mean I need to have those conversations in every aspect of my life, right? So that's one of my boundaries. Um, I try to respond to folks in, my direct messages, but sometimes that's not possible. I work a full-time job, and I, also do social media, and so sometimes my time is limited, and sometimes it's just one of my, boundaries that I'm trying to be better at. Is at a very particular time in the day, I shut down from technology. I'm like, I am not on my phone. I am not looking at email. I'm going to be present. I'm going to water my plant. I painted last night. So, like I just creating those intentional moments where you're not on your phone is really, really important to me, and definitely a boundary that I've had to set in order for me to still enjoy social media, right? I think it's important that we sometimes, get away from it a little bit. So those are some of my boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah, no, those boundaries, it's crucial because if you don't like, okay, so Feminista Jones, I did so I used to have this kind of like educational nonprofit called Equality for Her that I ran out of Brooklyn. And I did a lesson on personal branding for the internship class that we had.
Mm.
And I interviewed Feminista Jones, and it was another one of those things where I was like, okay, I'm gonna get this education, but it's also very much for me. And one of the things she said
Hello.
back then, this was like I think like 2016, 2015. And she said, if you or your job, you don't want to become like, you don't want to hate your job if your job is you. And through social media, that is so
Mm,
often the
mm,
case. And like,
mm,
if you
mm,
don't like what you're projecting, what you're putting out there, or what people are like, what people are responding to, you need to shift that. So a lot of people
mhm.
followed me because I was talking so much about Black trauma, and that became completely unsustainable. And I had to kind of like rehone and reorient folks like, hey, you're coming here for education. Here's the things that I'm going to be offering. So that way, when folks ask me for something, it's kind of with the conscious understanding that, like, you're asking me for labor that you're also not wanting to compensate most times. And that's not something that I like can commit to because it's an expectation that I didn't set, and I can't commit to expectations that were set without my knowledge or consent. I can't commit to those.
Hello. Hello.
Um,
And I think
but
we deserve to grow, right? We deserve to grow and change, right? And so I think that's also with something with social media. They're like, oh, you're going to remain the same person that I followed 3, 4 years ago. Like, we deserve for our interest areas to change. We deserve to explore new ventures, and to try different things and to, explore adventure. And so I think that's also uh, really, really important. And also, like, one of the dehumanizing things about social media, like, humans grow, humans change, we evolve. And we should be able to do that with our social media presence as well.
yeah, like we should be able to change at least as much as this algorithm does without being punished for it.
You
I mean, at
better
least. I mean, right? Like my
period.
favorite thing with when Facebook became Meta was folks was like, okay, now y'all understand that it's Meta now, so you're not going to use the old name, so you can extend that grace to folks that are real people in your real life, you know?
Thank
Um,
you. Thank
but
you.
that in that same vein, there's capitalism, right? Like I find that when I shift myself, then sometimes people, oh, well, this is not what I came to consume. This is not what I wanted to be spending money on. And especially in the publishing world, that is so often the case. And I know you recently became an author. That's a harrowing experience. Like folks just want to applaud authors. And yes, we should, all
Hello.
praise. But also it's kind of exhausting. Like it's a whole new industry, at least for me it was. I started writing in
Mm,
2017. And
mm.
I it's one of those things where like when you get to a new place in your career, so often it's like people are preoccupied with praising you but not really preparing you for like what's about to come. Like you need to be able to advocate for yourself. This
Or
is a
they're
story
not
you want to
prepared for you in your greatness. They're not prepared for you in your greatness. So also that.
yeah, they want to put you in a box and like that don't work.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so what like I mean for me this the last book that I wrote, Read This to Get Smarter, I felt the most me. The past two books I had written were on history, course queering those things. Like I wrote a book called Making Our Way Home: The Great Migration and the Black American
Mm,
Dream,
mm,
and
mm.
there's a couple on the front. Well, it's three couples. It's an old family picture. I put myself and my fiance on one side, and then I have my great aunt and uncle
Oh.
Clarence and Carmen, and then on the side. There was this uncle who we had known was queer and was standing so awkwardly next to a woman in this picture, and so I decided to like
Mm.
retroactively give him a partner in the picture, and like maybe they can put the cover on screen so that folks can see what I'm describing. um and I'm never going to be somebody who tells history and then omits the people that were there because I'm a history teller. I'm not a,
Hello.
what's it called, eraser, whitewasher, straight washer.
Hello.
And so it was so funny because even though there's a queer couple on the front of the book, people are reading it, and I was getting so much feedback. Like, Blair, how dare you talk about queerness in the context of Black history? How dare you do that? And I find that even when I'm like, well, I'm telling the story of history, and queer people were there, so I'm gonna tell that story. There's still backlash against it, and it's just so interesting. And so like, and then there's the other side of it where people want our full story before they want to listen to what we have to say. Who are you?
Mhm.
Justify your existence. Like I was talking about with
Mhm.
pronouns or with how you express your gender, or like, you know, how are you doing this and that? It's like, well, just because, as Feminista Jones would say, just because you're new to me doesn't mean I'm new to this. And so
Hello,
how has
hello.
it been navigating this? Like, you have a story that you want to tell, but people want a certain story from you.
Woo, child. Yeah, I mean, whew, Lord. I think, when working with, one, this has been a huge learning experience. Navigating, jobs in the education system, navigating jobs in the nonprofit sector. I've had to learn, especially when I got my first job working as a college counselor for a nonprofit. Um, I had to learn how to advocate for myself, right? And that's not something they necessarily prepare you for throughout your school career, right? Like being able to advocate for yourself, and that's starting with like salary, right? And then resources to do your job, and then all those things that comes with it, right? And so, like I honestly like social media and what it's become for me, as a way to build community, as a way to, secure the bag, secure the coins, right? Um, I didn't see it as that many years ago. When I first started this, didn't have any inkling or clue that it would turn into what it's turned into today, and the opportunities that have come before me, which I'm extremely grateful for, and I'm learning so much about myself and having an amazing time navigating these experiences. But with these experiences come the need to advocate for yourself, because what do humans do? We make assumptions. We size people up as soon as we see them, right? And we make up a story in our head around who they are and how they're going to engage with whatever we want to bring to them, right? And so when working with brands, I found that, some brands are putting a particular story on to me before I've really had the chance to really share with them what I can offer them, right? And so, I uh, and I'm always curious, like what brands think of me after working with me, because I think folks see me on social media and they perceive me happy, and that's all I am. But I'm a businesswoman at the end of the day too, so like you're gonna hear from me, and I got my own opinion. I know what I'm good at. I know my skills, and I know my voice, right? And so if we're gonna do this, if we're gonna do a collaboration, it's going to be in my voice. All right. If we can't do it in my voice, then it's not going to work.
Can I just say that you constantly serve Eartha Kitt to me? Like, yes, we're gonna have fun, we're gonna have a great time, but you're going to pay me,
Hello,
honey. You're
Josh.
going to pay me. I love that for you. Like when you said that, I was like serving Eartha Kitt realness right
Hello, a
there.
constant inspiration. A constant
Truly. And
inspiration.
I also have this thing of like when like my friends, I'm always trying to like pick somebody out of like history to like marry them up with, so I can like conceptualize them in that way. It's like me casting a movie, but it's just me casting the past in my
Hello.
present. Um, and also it resulted in me. I did a documentary that's coming out in the summer, and I was
Woo,
talking
can't
about
wait.
Josephine Baker, and I did my hair like with the little, well, I didn't, but the stylist did. I was like, "Do you know how to do
Hello.
finger waves?" She was like, "Yes." But anyway, that aside, no, it's so key. And I think also as a historian, it is very connected to it because I see how people are discussing folks retroactively after they've passed, after they don't have the opportunity
Mm,
to declare what they wanted to discuss. The way that folks talk about James Baldwin, the way that the white gay community talks about James Baldwin, and the way that the black straight community talks about James Baldwin, and how people can pick and choose what they want. But every time somebody reaches out, I'm like, I want to see the mood board. I want to see the inspiration board. I want to know how you got here.
thank
And I
you.
think
Thank
having
you.
an agency has been so beneficial to me because
Same,
I don't have to
same,
go through that. Like I have
same,
folks who they respect, who they want to negotiate with, being able to dictate these things. And I have a speaking agent, I have a PR team, I have the like my brand agent who helps me get deals and stuff. And
same. Yeah,
at the end of the day, still though, when they bring an opportunity to you, you have to decide, do I want to put my name on that? And I think that's been something a
exactly.
lot of like folks in just so many spaces come to, like a lot of folks who went viral during 2020 coming into the influencer space, a lot of folks who are transitioning careers and becoming influencers, dealing with backlash regardless of what your standpoint is something that I think needs to be taught about because it happens. Like it is so
Hmm.
common, it is so frequent. And it's for different things. Like maybe a company that you partnered with comes out with some horrible story and then you're accountable to them even though you didn't know that was happening. You wouldn't have done it if you knew
Exactly.
it was happening. And also you're not
Exactly.
the CEO. You were just hired to promote a product. And so it's like so many of these things all at once. But I think within all of it, like I will say, just like I'm so grateful, just like you were saying, I didn't have a savings account before becoming an influencer. Like I was doing the same stuff, but on a different scale. I felt like I was exhausting
Hmm.
myself to try to make money, which is the whole thing with capitalism. And I'm still kind of exhausted. But
Hello.
my pillows
Hello.
are nicer.
Hello. Hello. Come on. Period. Hello. I know that's right. I
It's
love
just
it.
like we want to be able to be comfortable and also be in this work. And I think
And
that's
that's
something
what
that's
we
very
deserve. And
disruptive
that's what
about
we
the work that
deserve.
you do.
And
Like
that's I,
it's
and I
showing joy.
no, and I appreciate, but I feel like that's what we deserve. Like we as Black folk, as queer folks, we deserve to live lush lives, live comfortably, doing the stuff that we love and not struggling, right? Um, and back to just like working with brands. I think another interesting conversation that I don't feel is being had enough is that when brands use the uh, our likeness, our personalities, our imagery, to promote something on, whatever websites or page they have, and they're not held accountable to, the harassment and the cyberbullying that appears in the comments. And that is something that I feel like brands have to be better at. If you're thinking about inclusion, diversity, and you want to pride, your company or your brand, ethos on bringing diverse voices and representation into the mix, then you also need to deal with all the stuff that we deal with on the daily, right? We deal with bullying, we deal with harassment, we deal with homophobia, transphobia, racism, right? And so when y'all bring us on, y'all got to be prepared and equipped to handle that, right? So I think that's also like another thing that I try to talk to brands about, not too much because that's a separate fee. If you want me to do some consultation around diversity and inclusion, honey, that's a separate fee, baby. But I mentioned that to them, like, hey, if you're going to be using this on your page, you're going to need to monitor your comments, right? Because I don't want to go to your page and see those things. So it's also just holding them accountable to those things. So
And I wonder with you, when you tell them that, they act like, what? Our followers never do those things. We are the most decorous, polite,
I'm
appropriate
like, watch
community.
and
And you're like,
see, watch and
yeah, y'all
see.
have not posted somebody like me. Like I tell people that from the jump because I need them to be prepared because I know what I'm gonna deal with. They might not know what I'm
Exactly.
gonna deal with. Like,
Exactly.
it's a mess. Like having the name Christopher, all the little jokes people are gonna say about having the name Christopher. With me,
Mhm.
people are gonna say Blair Witch Project, they're gonna say Tony Blair, they're gonna say Blair from Gossip Girl. I know these things. And the same
Mhm.
thing goes with my identities. And I find that this
Mhm.
happens in the nonprofit space. I want to talk
Mhm.
briefly, working with the team at Feminist, like Feminist, the page on Instagram, completely restructured. It's a completely
Mhm.
woman run team.
Mhm.
And I'm the platform educator. And a huge part of that process has been meeting with people who have been wronged by the platform before it was restructured to be woman centric and like
Mhm.
actually intersectional feminism, who like had a picture go up and who like just dealt with the trauma of going through the comment section or like people sending them DMs because they were elevated. And it's this
Mhm.
whole misunderstanding that like when you put somebody on a platform, you're giving them exposure and you might think, oh, that's just beneficial. But there's also so much that goes into it. Like people get doxxed. Like there's so many things if you're not accounting for protecting people, for letting people know ahead of time, hey, this is what's up. So when we
Mhm.
restructured, we spent a bunch of time just turning the comments off until people could learn how to act. Until all the people who didn't know how to act would unfollow us until they
Mhm.
got like, hip on what we were doing. And then also reaching out to people who had been wronged because
Mhm.
like even though it wasn't our fault, like it was different management, it's
Mhm.
still like, but it happened here and we are here. And how can we like, kind of reach out? But there's so many different industries, whether it's television with producers setting people up literally,
Mhm.
like to have violence committed against them, social media platforms, and I have seen some folks shift, like Sephora recently launched kind of like a set of guidelines that, you know, if
Mm,
you're getting blocked from Sephora, here's why. It's because you were being transphobic when we shared
mm,
somebody's page.
mm.
And it's like, this is a long time coming, but the block button isn't enough. And also, like, the social media managers, like, it shouldn't just fall on them. Like, it has to be
Yeah.
from the top down and then also resourced properly. Like,
It has to be a
the amount of
team. It has
their,
to be a
you know,
team of folks. It has to be a team of folks. Um, Yeah, I think it's important that they dedicate resources to those things because it does impact the folks that, it does impact storytellers and influencers and the folks that are sharing parts of themselves, right? We're sharing parts of ourselves. And so there need to be intentional resources, dedicated to making sure that we're protected and that we're not having to like deal with that mess because we deal with it on a daily basis in our everyday lives.
yeah, no, it's so hectic. And it's also like, it feels sometimes like you're supposed to do that. Like, you're just supposed to be experiencing violence when you put yourself out there. And I think that's
Hmm.
still at the core of coming out. Especially now, like, some folks are are coming out and launching like a brand collab or and launching a
Yeah,
television show.
yeah.
And that's fun and great, but it also, like, I think it doesn't capture the fact that, like, we have anti-trans legislation happening. We have a don't say gay bill that's being discussed in Florida. Like, it is violent and dangerous to be queer and to just exist in this
Hmm.
moment, and you want people to come out without any accountability for that. Like, it's dangerous, it's reckless. And so how have you navigated that? Like, what do you tell, like, because I know folks reach out to you, like, when you're a queer person on the internet, folks reach out and they're like, what do I do, how can I come out? And I sometimes tell people, like, you might not, it might not be safe for you, and it's okay,
Yeah,
like, you can come out to yourself.
yeah. I think, and even the term coming out, I've always had like issues with. I try to, because for most of my life, I was creating a little queer world for myself, right? And I didn't want to come out of that queer world. I wanted to invite people in. I'm like, child, y'all can come on in. I ain't coming out, child. Y'all can come on in, okay? And so I think it's important for folks to understand that when you are exploring and unlearning. I think that's a big part of the beauty of queerness is the unlearning of all the lies that we've been told growing up, right? The ways that we've been denied to explore ourselves, the ways that we have been told not to explore ourselves, right? And so for me, I think for folks who are listening who are figuring out their queerness, that it's a lifelong journey, right? I found I don't feel the need to come out anymore. I'm just like, this is who I am. And if you don't know, then you're late. And for me, really, it was in the beginning of my journey, just preparing, like really coming out to myself, like, really learning about myself and exploring myself just for me, right? Not for the sake of anyone else. And depending on like your life circumstances, you may feel the need to share your magic with the world. But it's not, I don't think it's obligatory. Like, folks do not need to share their magic with the world if you are not ready to. I have found that my family has been a huge support for me. Their love, and this is given family and chosen family, and their love has liberated me in a way that I know I have an anchor and a foundation rooted in a community of folks who love me for who I am, who I was, who I am, and who I will be, right? And so when you have that root system, right, you can branch off in so many different directions and always just come back if you need to. So I encourage folks to really just build that community of folks who love and appreciate you, and y'all are watering each other. Y'all are just feeding each other and shining light on each other in the ways that y'all need to. Um, and honestly, it has helped me to exist unapologetically and authentically in who I am as a person because it's scary. It's scary. Bullying is real. Harassment is real. But I know at the end of the day that I have folks who love me. That I can always go back to, and so that has allowed me to strut with the confidence that I have. So yeah, yeah, yeah.
I just love that you're using plant metaphors throughout the whole thing. Like, this is exactly what I envisioned. I love that so much.
Hello.
I often tell folks that we're flowers with many petals, and
Oh,
the
come
core of who you are. Now,
on.
the way that I was told this was with so much shade. I was on a trip, I was in Kenya, and I was talking to a
Hmm.
woman, and she kept bringing stuff up, and I have like a story for everything because I think I'm just good at connecting dots, and I'm a good
Uh-huh.
storyteller.
Hmm.
And she was like, "You are a flower with many petals," which was like, "Girl, you doing too much." But I was like, "That's okay." And I've used it as this framework for how we understand ourselves. That like you could have as many petals as a hydrangea or as few as a tulip, and you are still just a whole flower. And what you need and where you come from, like whether you grew up between the cracks of the concrete or in like a
Mm,
sprawling
mm,
garden, like when we come together, we're all
mm,
part of this garden of life, and we can learn how to arrange each other in ways that maybe the person who's used to being close to the sun needs to take a step back so that the folks who are almost wilting can be nourished. And um, I just think it's so beautiful, and regardless of whether others accept us, right? Like you have a
mm,
beautiful support system, I have a beautiful support system, and even if you're in a position and you're listening to this and you don't have that, remember that you will, that everything that you
mhm,
need is already inside of you. And it's just about
mhm,
accessing that, getting to a place where you are nourished in these ways and surviving in whatever way that you can to get there. Without reinforcing
mhm,
those systems of oppression, right? There's one thing to kind of be quiet
mhm.
about who you are, and there's another thing to be loud about hating. But to be quiet about
Hello.
who you are, to accept who you are, to love who you are, even as you seek out people who love you that same way, um, that is something that is already guaranteed for you because that's what was meant for you.
Hello.
And I've just had such a beautiful time talking with you, Christopher. You're so amazing. I'm just floored that you do everything that you do and you got a full time job. Yes, yes. Um, and hopefully, we'll be able to connect again soon. And thank you
Yeah.
so much, first person, for having us on.
No, thank you, Blair. You are phenomenal. You are magical. And to share space with you is truly a blessing and an honor. So thank you, thank you, thank you for everything that you do and the spaces that you create, and the teaching that you do, because that is not easy work. It is not easy work. And you do it so well. And so thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for your life because it's definitely shining pathways for folks, that is very much needed. So thank you, thank you, thank you for everything that you do.
Oh my God, thank you. Oh, you gonna make me mess up my mascara? No, I'm so serious. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.